Hi, everyone. I'm DeFi Dad. You're watching episode 30 of Yield TV. All right. It's November 11th, 2020, and I've got Vance Spencer today with me from Framework Ventures. So just a little background on Vance. He is the co-founder of Framework Ventures. Framework was founded in December 2017. It is one of, I believe, still the largest holders of Link. They announced this in December 2017 and would soon become also one of the largest market participants in the Chainlink community. Since then, they've had an epic run investing and championing many of the household brand names that we know in DeFi, like Synthetics, Aave, FutureSwap, Dodo, and more recently, in our own team here at Zapper. So Vance has been a vocal proponent of making concentrated investments in DeFi and pushing to not only actively participate in DeFi programs like liquidity mining with Synthetics early on, but also building tools like SNX.tools. So I want to talk through how Framework arrived at many of the investor theses that I believe are actually playing out right now. And also I'm interested to learn like what you see in the coming years for DeFi. So anyways, Vance, welcome to Yield TV. How are you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me. Kind of a cold San Francisco day, but DeFi is doing well, and that's great, and it's good to be here.
It's funny because I'm on the East Coast now, and it's been very warm. So it's interesting that it's gotten cold there, but I'm sure I'll be shivering in the snow very soon. And
yeah, soon enough.
Vance, why don't we start with, I think one of the most interesting things to learn about everyone in our space is just their origin story. Everyone wants to know, like, how did you find your way into crypto? So talk me through, like, how did you ever discover crypto? And I guess more specifically, would love to learn how you discovered Chainlink and why you became so bullish on Ethereum.
Yeah. So my origin story is, my background and Michael, my co-founders, is in consumer internet. He was a PM at Snapchat and Dropbox, working on financial payment rails. I did corporate strategy at Netflix, first in LA and then in Tokyo, leading corporate development for all Northern Asia expansion. So, we really come at this from a consumer internet perspective. And I think that's reflected in our origin story. We don't have any really cool or kitschy stories about mining Bitcoin in our dorms. Like, we were kind of honestly like probably too old for that story to play out for us. And so we kind of found more interest in, this sounds absurd today, but, things like Ripple, where, they were effectively trying to build what is today USDC for an interbank payments network, for remittances, for, all types of financial technology use cases, less kind of, associated with kind of being money or trying to be, a store of value. And I think that is kind of what originally really interested us. And Michael used to live on Pine Street in San Francisco, and he lived right next to a lot of the Ripple guys, and so we used to hang out with a lot of them really kind of when that was just getting started. And so for us, it's always kind of been born out of this consumer and financial technology interest instead of kind of more of the Bitcoin maximalism or things like that. And so, we started kind of, buying crypto together, and Michael and I have been in a foxhole together for forever. So, all the ups and downs of kind of, the market from 2014 to kind of present day. But we started buying it, started learning about it, started playing around with it, and this was kind of when Ripple was selling XRP off of its own exchange, which, got shut down by the SEC and is a whole kind of another can of worms. But that's kind of how we came up with, crypto, just kind of living in that community and getting used to the volatility and the shifting narratives of something like Ripple, where, at first it was kind of trying to be this, this kind of payment rail, and then it was kind of focused on remittances, and there was changes in the team, there was changes in the narrative. And that was actually pretty good conditioning for kind of what we do today. Which is largely, it's definitely has a lot of fundamental value and fundamental technology behind it, but a lot of it is kind of, how do you match kind of, mind share of a market to market share eventually. And I think that was, to a large extent, our origin story. kind of fast forwarding to today, Michael and I worked at these consumer internet companies. We founded a startup called Hashleads before this. It was the first NFT digital collectible platform on the Ethereum, or on the iOS App Store with an Ethereum connection. That was a moderately successful kind of experiment in consumer technology. We ended up selling it, but really kind of the best knowledge we got from that is how hard it is to build things, on Ethereum, and how clunky that consumer tech is. And literally when we went and raised our first fund for Framework, it was a diagram of Hashleads on the iPhone, and really all the pain points laid out as far as developers, of things that we really couldn't do and things we needed, things like the graph, things like Chainlink, and honestly, things like UIs like Zapper for trophy cases. And that's what really a lot of kind of our thesis and motivation behind the first fund was. And that started in 2017, 2018, and it's just kind of grown since then.
I'm curious how much of your success since, let's say, 2017, when you really made a huge investment into Chainlink, how much of your success do you attribute to, hard work, skills, some sort of asymmetric knowledge that you developed versus luck? Because there are a lot of people who made concentrated investments in the last few years, and obviously, many of those have not played out. And I have always found it remarkable the number of successes you guys have had. I don't know if you see it that way, but like I have felt in the last few years, especially, that it seems like whatever I hear an announcement of you having invested in, I'm like, okay, Synthetics. Synthetics has had an epic run. Whenever you started getting involved in Aave, I was like, all right, Aave must have some incredible opportunities coming. So anyways, I'm just curious, like, how much of that you attribute to the work you put in versus maybe some luck.
Yeah, I mean, Michael and I are obsessed with not looking in the rear view. I think like you honestly, you get to a point where you're like, okay, if we hit this metric or we, make this much, then we'll be, good and we can just rest on our laurels. But honestly, that has never kind of been the case with us. We've kind of continually moved the goalpost to try to do bigger and better things that kind of push the ball forward for the entire industry. We do have a big thesis on, being ownership focused with the networks we support. We have a thesis on being activists. And, there's a certain element of us just being able to kind of see where the market is going and positioning our portfolio to kind of take advantage of that. But also a lot of it is just like the mental toughness to be able to lose a lot of money and still kind of stay with those investments. Chainlink was an investment that went down 95% and we held it the entire way down, and then it rallied 100x. And honestly, that isn't probably for everybody. And you have to have the right LP base that's aligned with what you're doing. You have to have, honestly, the right partner. I couldn't have done it alone. Like Michael is the perfect counterbalance to kind of my kind of probably more aggressive investing philosophy. And just being able to kind of stomach losses and kind of stick with conviction in the things that you really believe in is probably the secret sauce. Like if I were to kind of rank, if you're a new fund, what would be the kind of differentiating factors for you versus other people? It would be, how mentally tough are you? Like, can you actually withstand the volatility that is in this market? And can you sit by the things that you're, have conviction in for multiple years as they kind of fluctuate? What's your kind of team? That's probably, secondary. And then third is probably thesis. Thesis really doesn't matter in this space as far as I'm concerned. Any thesis you have is likely to be wrong when someone like Andre Cronje can just, launch Keeper or Yearn, and you have to adapt on the fly.
Yeah.
And so really, I probably credit, just our success to Michael and I's partnership and just being, able to think through, not only what are the technological innovations that come with this technology, but also what are the kind of cultural implications about things that launch that have a liquid token that can bootstrap a community. I think we were generally first to kind of understand that. And I think we still pioneer kind of community building, which is, very fluffy, but, it's very real when you're harnessed correctly.
Yeah. Could you talk more about that? Like, I think it goes back to your point of being an activist investor. How have you demonstrated that? I gave an example earlier of SNX tools, but I'm curious if you can, share more examples.
Yeah, I mean, it goes, everything from, Edgeware, we're probably running, 10 to 15 to 20% of all nodes. Chainlink, we're running a few different price reference feeds. We're redesigning token economics. We are, you know, helping onboard new data providers, which should be announced soon to the Chainlink network. And really kind of like, I think we see our role within a network as kind of like a free safety on a football team. We're just roaming around trying to make plays. We're not necessarily trying to quarterback the team. We're not necessarily trying to direct the entire defense, but we're trying to make plays where kind of the teams, either have not recognized yet or kind of are not able to due to kind of their constraints as a core team. And that ranges from everything from, just like boots on the ground, community building, which is really just grunt work. It's showing up every day in the Discord, making sure people are aligned and understanding what the vision is, and, helping the core team match expectations to kind of what the community really wants. A lot of that is just grunt work, and you need to have the energy for it, and you need to kind of be, really kind of bought in. There's no such thing as being like halfway skin in the game. Especially with things that you own a very concentrated position in. Owning a concentrated position means that you're going to be wrong for long periods of time, and you have to be okay with that, and you have to be committed to still doing all of that work that in the bull market is a lot of fun. In the bear market, it's probably one of the more depressing things that you ever had to do. Yeah. It's just kind of something that you have to really commit yourself to every single day. And yeah, I think, doing things like every day, committing to show up to the office and doing, 5 or 10 things for the community, whether that's an AIP or whether that's an SIP or whether that's just talking to people in the Discord, it goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, when I heard you on Bankless a while ago, and I definitely didn't understand that there were more who were thinking in this manner that you are. It's the way I've thought the last few years, that if I am working on a project, let's just say generally Ethereum, I believe that like I can continue to add value, and that over time, as long as I'm consistently adding value and I'm working to onboard others to add value, that like we can be successful, especially with the convictions I have about what's being built in general with the DeFi projects that you're all invested in and Ethereum. It just takes a lot of hard work, and it's going to take, it takes a lot of patience. And as you said, like you have to hold strong to those beliefs in some pretty like challenging times. So I'm curious, how do you evaluate DeFi teams, given the successes I've called out here, and picking out what I think have been outliers in our space? Like, how do you identify a successful founder or a successful team that's building in DeFi?
Yeah, I mean, it's different in different phases of the market. In the bear market, everyone's so beaten down that, if you're still alive at that point, you're kind of a true believer. And so, it does a lot of that self-filtering for you. And since honestly Compound launched, however long ago that was, 4 or 5 months ago, probably more recently than that, there's been probably 3 or 4 times as many teams, but they're of half the quality. And so your first job is just disqualifying people. This person's not in it for the right reason. This team hasn't really built, anything before. Or this team doesn't have the technical chops to pull off what they're kind of trying to do. And that's kind of your first job. And I would say you probably get down to half the people just on that first level of disqualification. And then you're kind of going through, what are the real technical innovations you're doing? Do you have any interesting insights on the community side? Does this team have a history together? Does this team have a history together building things? There's kind of a set of filtering criteria that you can kind of get down to 10 to 5% of the total kind of people who reach out to you. And then it's really about seeing, what their kind of vision is. Are you building something that's going to take, 1 or 2 years of R&D and intensive kind of capital to really pull it off? Are you doing something that we can put out to the market in the next 3 to 6 months? And I think we generally tend to err on the side of, let's really kind of put capital to work over a couple of years. Let's build this together. Let's think through something differentiated that we can put into the market, rather than just saying like, oh, we have a Wi-Fi competitor, it's worth $100 million. That really isn't interesting to me. The net new concepts are the stuff that's interesting to me. And honestly, the real rare resource in this space is just the talented entrepreneurs that can pull it off. And so, if I think I have a pretty good filtering criteria, just, in terms of people's character, are they really interested in this stuff? Can they build a team? Can they recruit people? And that's kind of where I make, most of the judgment calls in terms of just, do we want to invest in this? Do we actually vibe with this team? Do we get along? Do we want to be on this journey together for 4 or 5 or 10 years? Just because, neither of those parties want to waste their time if it's not a mutual fit.
Vance, do you think any of your assumptions or that any narrative around Wiren.finance has changed over the last few months? I was very bullish on it from the start because of the fact that I think that it makes really powerful DeFi mechanisms accessible to all. But just in light of like the market drawdown and across really all of crypto in the last few months, just curious, like, have you seen anything change there? Are you holding fast to those assumptions and hypotheses?
Yeah, I mean, we're holding fast. We're holding. We're just for context. Both of equity markets and for anything in crypto, Yearn was the fastest asset to $1 billion valuation of all time. So like with all of the good, comes some of the, okay, now that you've hit this valuation,
Yeah.
Do you have a roadmap? You need to kind of do some soul searching. And honestly, did I expect it to go down to 7,000 or 8,000 or whatever it hit? Probably not. It felt a little bit over kind of done, but Yearn needed that moment where it was kind of like, okay, this is now depressing. Like, who is going to step up and lead this? What is the team? What is the roadmap? What does V2 look like? And that's kind of when these projects really define themselves. It's not when they hit the $1 billion valuations and everyone's like, oh, great, it's all good. It's when things are a little bit, shakier. And so, I love the work that Banteg, the Klim, that Trake, that all those guys are doing. I think that they're taking it in the right direction. Asset management is a gigantic industry, and there's going to be a few of these different things that cater to, different sets of interests based on whether you're in a specific asset or you kind of want a specific type of yield. And so there's going to be a lot of Yearn competitors. The thing that Yearn has going for it, is the brand. And honestly, that is worth so much in, look at traditional kind of robo-advisors, Wealthfront, Betterment. The amount of marketing those guys spend is astronomical. They're just trying to get 1 to 2% edge on a brand basis to get their net promoter score up so that they can win all the business, in this market. And so, I think Yearn has a really bright future. It needed to have this time where it was down, and it needed to kind of have like a soul searching period where it kind of really redefined what it was going to do, because just subsisting on farming and dumping curve is great, but the universe of strategies has to expand. It has to include things like hedging against a permanent loss. It has to include things like, going leverage long or short or future trade or basis trading arbitrage. It has to kind of expand into those areas. And the stuff that was preventing it from getting there was honestly how the performance fee was structured. The 0.5 exit fee and then the 5% performance on harvest just really was not scalable. And 2 and 20 just makes it so much better from a strategy creator perspective that kind of solves that side of the equation. And that's really kind of where Yearn is constrained, is just high quality strategies. So yeah, there's a long way to go for Yearn. I think it's going to do really well, upon launch of V2 and kind of that reinvigoration. And yeah, we're super excited about it as well.
Yeah. I was surprised too to kind of see that. I would say it was an overcorrection in light of the fact that the protocol has had such success, and knowing that these V2 vaults are coming. But I think sometimes I have to like remind myself that a lot of the world is not spending all of their time like we will in like a Discord or talking with teams or just learning, constantly about all of these coming updates. So, you have to remind yourself, what is the average person looking at here? And there is, there definitely was, like I said, an overcorrection, I think, in DeFi the last few months. Vance, what do you think are some of the best opportunities in terms of building in DeFi right now? Like, what do you see missing in the DeFi landscape? Or maybe what are the biggest opportunities in terms of applications that we think will be adopted by a larger addressable market?
Yeah, so I think, futures and options are kind of the most obvious ones. And, to be totally frank, we invested in a lot of features and options stuff about this time last year. And these projects take a year to kind of really kind of build out the team and build out the product and build out kind of the community. And in a couple of weeks, we'll see a lot of these things launch, and that'll seem so obvious that, derivatives were the 90% of the profit centers of crypto, and DeFi is gigantic now. And, the DeFi carousel will continue to spin. And that's kind of how these things always work. If I were building in this space today, I would kind of either do a couple things. I think insurance is really interesting and not done extremely well. I think there's a lot of kind of different avenues that you could take there, both on the unregulated and the regulated path. I also think, DeFi is for me, it's like, it's this technology layer that enables a lot of different things. Personal tokens really couldn't happen before Uniswap. There just weren't liquid markets for long tail tokens. And so, I think, and this also comes with kind of like maturing as we, continue to invest, we're not going to kind of go back to where we were a year and a half ago, where DeFi was really young and cheap and unexplored, and just continue to do the same thing. I think both as an investor and an entrepreneur, you have to continue to kind of innovate and push the boundaries of kind of where you are operating. And so I think, a lot of the content and media stuff that is starting to get built out, whether it's, personal tokens, whether it's kind of, platforms that are decentralized that can help curate content. I think those are probably going to be big in the next, 3 to 5 years. And those are going to be investable starting, sometime this year. We invest this year, it takes a year and a half, 2 years to build, and then it'll launch in, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of the cycle you have to be looking at as an entrepreneur. You can't look at the market right now and say, oh, futures are hot, let's go build a futures platform. The market will have moved and will have been dominated by other competitors before you get there. And so I would kind of look further afield to even newer opportunities, not quite outside DeFi, to kind of see where the greenfield really is. And I think a lot of that is going to be in things like personal tokens.
Does Framework have exposure to personal tokens or I guess to platforms for personal tokens?
No, I mean, we've looked at a lot of the ones, like, I've looked at TryRoll. I don't think they're doing it correctly. It's like all about the token, and like, it really should be about the content and the user experience that you're trying to create, where, you're using Web2 lead gen to kind of go into some crypto native asset monetization for either influencers or creators. And there's a lot of different flavors of this, and this is just a general example, but those are just the things that we haven't seen be well explored yet, that are probably going to come up over the next 2 or 3 years, that if you're an entrepreneur, you need to skate to where the puck is going, not to kind of where it already is.
Yeah, I would be really interested to see someone build an index of personal tokens, because at the end of the day, like, I don't trust that I'll ever be able to pick out the winners if you're going to go for the actual personal token versus something like a platform. But I would be interested to hold an index. I also am just very bullish on these. Even as like with the content that I was creating on my YouTube channel with just DeFi tutorials, if I wasn't working here at Zapper, if this wasn't like where I see the future, I think like that was a route that I would have potentially taken. And it was, I can say at least it was something I was considering, but I was very fearful of the regulation like that could come after me. And I wish everyone the best who's building a personal token, because I think it takes a lot of bravery to actually launch one right now. Vance, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Yeah, I mean, like, simping culture, all this stuff where people are kind of deified and treated as, modern day gods on social media, whether it be kind of influencers or traders on Twitter, really kind of the thing that, OnlyFans pioneered is like using Web2 lead gen to lead into some other monetization, selling high priced goods that are kind of astronomically priced. And like, that is a direct comp for kind of what you can do with a personal token. I see personal tokens less of kind of like a quasi income sharing agreement and more as just kind of like this modern day fan club on steroids. And, totally understand the kind of perspectives on, you have to be brave to launch this. But there is some good kind of regulatory cover with things like gift cards and kind of comping to those analogies, where you can kind of start to close the loop in terms of, this not being, absurdly dangerous from a regulatory perspective.
That's really interesting. Almost like personal tokens could almost be thought of as like a trading card for folks that, I don't know, add value in some way, or you admire them for some reason. It's funny only because when I start a Yield TV episode, so like today, this is awesome. We've got like almost 30 people watching live right now, which I attribute to you. But many days there's like a big fat zero there. And so I'm always like, yep, no one gives a shit about me. I'm glad I didn't launch that personal token. Anyways, you just made me think of that. And I was like chuckling here, and I'm like, Vance is gonna think I'm chuckling at his answer. He's like, what's the matter with this dude? Anyway, Vance, what do you think, going with like the question about the opportunities to build in DeFi? I'm always curious, like, is there anything that you and Michael discuss that you know to be true at Framework that you believe is not understood at all by the DeFi mass market yet? Like, in other words, I guess, what is like the least understood truth that you and Michael know to be true at Framework?
Yeah, so it's kind of a combination of two things. One, base layers might not be that good of a business. If you're Ethereum and you're looking at Solana and you see them cut fees 80%, either that's an amazing technological, step forward that they've made, or it's probably a business that, just doesn't have that high of a margin. Base layers, every competitor is selling the same thing. You have layer twos, you have new blockchains, those are both just kind of long-term going to lead to fee compression. And, if base layers can't really prove out at least some aspect of this kind of fat protocol thesis, it seems like it's going to kind of go pretty quickly to a world where, and this is going to be pretty ironic, where altcoins, are the primary, consumer interaction layer. They own the customer relationship. They have real pricing power as they kind of offer, heterogeneous sets of goods. And so I think that's probably the least understood truth from a lot of people. And, that's something that, we're both bullish on ETH and we have that perspective. So you can kind of hold both of those ideas in your head over different time horizons. But, we run 10-year venture funds. So, we kind of have to invest over a long time horizon to kind of, really understand these markets. And so that's probably the thing that I think is the least understood. The other thing that I think is just not well understood is just the size of a lot of these markets and what needs to happen to get there. If DeFi can really start to make inroads with traditional finance and capital markets, these markets are probably 10 to 100 times larger than most people think. And 10 billion is an amazing goal. But, I think we should be shooting for 500 billion to $1 trillion locked in DeFi. And I think that'll come if, these systems can interface with regulators, interface with traditional financial providers, and help to kind of bridge some type of gap of understanding kind of between these two systems. And the first, 10 to $30 billion of capital in DeFi will be unregulated retail capital. The next 500 to $1 trillion will be regulated capital that needs assurances. They need, somebody at these companies that they can, reach out to when things aren't working. They need insurance. They need, guarantees from custody. They need all types of things that just don't exist in this market today. And so, if DeFi has legs, it's going to be, some type of regulated route. And that's probably, antithetical to a lot of what people believe in this space. But, that's just the honest truth. We're going to hit a ceiling here at some point. And it's, whether we get past that, it's going to be, largely determined by, are these systems able to interface with regulators? Are we able to get to a point of understanding with them? And so I think that's probably the other thing. And this is someone who loves kind of like pseudoing on degen retail, just like on Twitter. And so, that kind of is going to have to kind of reckon with, okay, this is a real asset class. And with becoming a real asset class becomes, not the, 500 million or $1 billion exits, you have 10, 50, $100 billion exits in this space that could be, really meaningful for everybody involved. And so embracing regulation is probably the other thing that we believe that not a lot of other people, at least retail, do.
What parts of regulation in 2020 have you begun to embrace? And also, I guess, what keeps you up at night in terms of regulation? Like, what do you actually worry could hinder growth in DeFi?
It starts with exchanges and exchanges to the fiat on ramps, and they have a lot of leverage to do things like, okay, you can only send to KYC addresses. You can only, interact with these sets of smart
That'd be
contracts.
a disaster.
You can't withdraw. And so, doing work on that is just, meeting with regulators and going through educational processes. And I think is one of the funds in DeFi, we just have a responsibility to do that. And so we've been doing that recently. The other stuff, and you can go through kind of the different regulatory agencies, the SEC, the CFTC, the OFAC, the DOJ, they all kind of have their own things that they want to understand, when it comes to this space, and, just kind of taking the tack that DeFi is unregulated and will never be subject to these laws is just something that I don't think will work long term. And so, talking to those folks also, and generally, DeFi had its big year in 2020, and now we'll kind of have the spotlight, and we'll kind of be interfacing with regulators, and maybe a new administration brings this to the forefront. But it's just going to be kind of a journey over the next 18 months to kind of help educate these people. And I think there's a lot of tailwinds, especially China being so forward thinking on digital currencies. That's just going to extend to the kind of technology stage of DeFi. And, do we want DeFi to be something that is, regulated, and regulation doesn't mean that we can't do the things that we want. It just probably means that there's some pieces of friction in the user experience that we'll just have to kind of get used to. And I think that's okay if we can grow the market 100x.
I'm trying to think of who I was asking this the other day. I think it was Michael Dunworth. Do you think that where we are in terms of the global pandemic, do you think that this is good for DeFi and crypto, or I mean, are we like connecting dots that shouldn't be connected? Like I'm curious, like how you gauge the impact of the pandemic on the performance of DeFi markets and crypto markets over the last year.
Yeah, I think the reality is, crypto is the smallest asset class. And, when you have all this liquidity flood into the market, the stuff that's thinner, from an asset class perspective, it's less liquid, is going to go up the most. And so, that's kind of the base layer effect. But kind of with that, you have, this understanding of Bitcoin as this kind of global non-sovereign core value. You have that kind of bleeding in directly to, all of the interest and hype and frenzy around DeFi and the grid works that's being done there. And so it's kind of like this cascading effect that's really all linked into one. I wouldn't say like pandemic is good for DeFi, but there's certainly a set of dominoes that it flicks that really leads to, both Bitcoin and more of the technology DeFi stuff becoming, more relevant in today's world. And the other thing I'll say is when you lock people up for 9 months and they're not sure where their next paycheck is coming from, there's a very small set of things they can do to generate meaningful, income. And one of them is kind of logging onto their laptops and trading or gambling or doing, small odd service jobs. And so that is kind of the other thing that is kind of pushing this forward, is just the ability for anybody to buy crypto assets, to stake them, to trade them, and to kind of both have a form of entertainment and a form of income generation all in one.
Yeah, really interesting to consider, like where we are right now. Have you thought at all about the effects of President-elect Joe Biden's administration when they transition into office? Do you know anything about what impact that could have? Like, in other words, like I believe there was some articles floating around about someone that would either like lead the CFTC or would be a part of it that was very bullish on crypto. But I haven't kept up with, whether there's any sort of like promising folks that would work in that administration that know Ethereum, DeFi, Bitcoin, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, President Trump was a lot of things, but he did put Hector Pierce into the SEC. Brian Brooks is OCC, Chairman Heath of the CFTC. That's kind of like the crypto triumvirate of true believers and people who, from my estimation, really want to push the space forward. Gary Gensler, who's the guy who's mentioned in Biden's transition team, is
That's the name, yeah.
historically, very bullish on Bitcoin and taught classes at MIT. But, it's really kind of who sits in those 3 or 4 key posts in the SEC, CFTC, DOJ, and then kind of what is their mandate from kind of top down. And it seems like Biden is going to be relatively reasonable with, being, technology first and probably, less so for the larger tech conglomerates. But this theme of decentralization and transparency and being fair and open and inclusive is something that resonates with, largely democratic agendas. And so, I would be hopeful that, the next 4 years would be, positive for us. It's also going to be good to not have the president, slandering the industry on a regular basis on Twitter. And so, that's kind of the other side of that coin. So, I think these things move in cycles, and 4 years isn't actually that long. So we'll see who's next, or what the Senate looks like. But yeah, I don't think it'll be too much of a meaningful impact for crypto, just given the amount of staunch supporters we already have in key posts.
Yeah, I almost forgot. As the election was coming, and I was looking back and realizing, we lived through that 2016, 2017 bull market. That was right after Trump had taken office. And I honestly had forgotten about it. It just feels so long ago. But it's interesting to me to have seen so much action over the last 4 years in the crypto markets. Vance, I had a few questions actually from folks in the live stream here. So we've got a little more than 5 minutes, right? Is that okay? Just want to make sure we get you off on time. Someone was asking, any ideas when, if staking comes to Chainlink?
So, not the right person to ask that to, but, the first thing that they're probably working on is threshold signatures. And that's just going to speed up Oracle latency. Right now, when you request a price feed from Chainlink, 21 feeds come on chain. This will make it so it's kind of signed off chain, pushed on chain, and it'll dramatically reduce the gas costs, which can reduce the deviation thresholds for which the Oracle's updates, which will make everything more real time. So that's kind of going to be one of the major things they're working on. Staking will be there eventually, as far as my understanding, but there's a lot to come for Chainlink, and really we see it as kind of in version like 0.3 or 4. It's really trying to build this two-sided marketplace where anybody can supply data and anybody can demand it. And Chainlink, the kind of token, and Chainlink, the technology stack, is kind of the middleman, which facilitates that. And that's still going to be, a little bit of ways away, but there's a lot of really interesting ways that they can expand the market kind of until that launches. And that's probably what we're most focused on for the next 3 to 6 months.
There's quite a few questions here about how regulators might be receiving DeFi and Ethereum. And I think we've kind of covered that already, but I did think this was an interesting one about Sam Bankman-Fried's donation of $5 million. I think the context of this is, I believe he made the largest investment of anyone to the Biden campaign. But what's interesting about that, I'll just say for me, is I think it's impossible to make a donation like that and to not receive some attention, from an administration or a staffer on the administration. So anyways, I don't know. Any thoughts on that, Vance? I'm not sure if you'd have any.
Yeah, I mean, Biden's campaign raised $1.2 billion. So, a lot of this stuff is a little bit of a drop in the bucket. I think that I've never given $5 million to a presidential campaign before, so I don't know what type of access that gets you.
Yeah. One question about more recent events. So I think it was a few hours ago that, we had Infura went down, and it clearly affected, quite a few applications, including like a MetaMask. Any thoughts on that? I mean, is this something significant that we should all be, taking some lessons from, or was this just whatever, another day in crypto? Another like nothing burger.
I mean, running these systems is really hard. If you've ever run a validator node, if you've ever run a, Oracle price feed, it's really hard to build systems that have, 5 or 6 nines of uptime. So like 99.999999%, like that's very hard to do. And so, not surprised, but like, I would say that consensus probably should just, really get that product together, just because there have been a lot of issues. And as kind of one of the core pieces of architecture of a lot of the stuff that we use in probably the entire space, it's hard when that stuff goes down for us.
Yeah. I haven't spent much time this morning beyond just reading some Twitter posts, and I'm always questioning whatever I'm reading, like how thoughtful is this analysis, and like, can I even trust this source? So I'm sure we'll learn more in the coming days. Vance, we'll probably wrap up here any minute, so I'll leave it open to you. Anything else that you think folks should be learning about in the DeFi space, or any teams that you'd recommend tracking more closely and learning about the applications they're building?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Zapper is a great one.
Sending you that ether. There we go. Just hit send. Not ETH. There it is. No, thanks. Appreciate that.
I'm trying to think of, in the next 3 to 4 weeks, derivatives will launch. It will seem very obvious to people that like this is the ultimate market that DeFi was, anointed to go and capture.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I've found a lot of value in is just hanging out with, more, I wouldn't call them traders, but more people who are interested in the flow of, how do futures trade? How do options trade? What is delta hedging? What is, futures interest rate arbitrage? What does that look like? That's going to be a lot of what this next leg of DeFi looks like, where, things are trading in real time with a lot of leverage. There's funding rates that you can capture in arbitrage. And maybe that's what a lot of kind of the next generation of yield farming looks like. And that stuff is just stuff you really kind of need to study up and understand before you really start to allocate capital towards it. Just because you're playing with leverage, you can get liquidated. These systems, they depend on oracles. And so understanding kind of how centralized kind of players work is probably the best place to kind of start. And then, when synthetics and future swap and all those good ones launch, you'll be able to transfer that knowledge directly to there. And so I think that would be the first thing. The other thing I would say is, these things move in cycles. Bitcoin goes up, DeFi goes down, DeFi goes up, Bitcoin's flat. These things are kind of just like breathing in and out. Even when you see Wi-Fi down to 7K, that probably means there's been a little bit of an overreaction or things like that. And so I would just counsel probably, taking deep breaths and taking some time away from Twitter and thinking, creatively about the space on your own. If you're kind of wondering what the next thing is or why a certain asset is doing something.
Yeah, actually, on that note, there was one last question that came up earlier. I missed just anything to comment on in terms of the role you're playing in Wi-Fi governance.
Yeah, to date, we've done work on the fee proposal. We've done work on the economics of the system, help recruit the team. Framework can't really do everything. And a lot of that is just kind of finding a team that is sustainable and aligned to kind of push things forward on a longer term basis. And I think that for now is kind of being left to the team. If we see major things that need correction, in the token economics and the community and the product itself, we're always going to put forward, our perspectives. But the reality is that, the team is building V2 right now. They don't just taking, cheap shots from the peanut gallery, like throwing comments and questions and stuff like that. There's a very defined set of things that they need to do, and they're executing on them, and they're going to ship soon. So I think for us, reevaluating where Wi-Fi is probably after that, from just our participation in governance, is how we're going to do it. But if you see any gaps or anything like that, happy to kind of talk about them over DM or Telegram or whatever.
Yeah, we move so quickly in this space, and I will always like look back to see like how many months ago was it that Wi-Fi didn't even exist, and how many months ago was it that comp didn't exist? That was really what sparked the explosion in 2020. We went from like an incredible year through May to celebrate already to saying, hey, we're at 12 billion in total value locked, and we're all looking back at 1 billion, which was a major milestone, and saying, whatever, which is what'll happen when we get to 100 billion. We'll say, 10 billion, that was nothing. It comes very quickly. I think by the end of 2020, actually, there is a minor chance we could eclipse 100 billion. Doesn't seem like it because we only have about 45 days, but 2021 is definitely going to be another explosive year for us.
Absolutely. And things take time, like we could send out 100 governance proposals right now.
Yeah.
Like we could do it, and it would be great. It would give us air cover for participating, but these people, like the team, just needs to build, and so kind of these asynchronous cycles where it's like, okay, put up the products. Where are we? Let's refine some stuff. Let's keep going, and so I know there's a desire for us to be continually all in the forums and all proposing governance and upgrading stuff, but there's just takes time to actually implement stuff.
Absolutely. Well, Vance, thanks so much for your time. This was really fun to get to talk through just all the insights you have to offer, and we'd love to have you back, of course, sometime. But always a pleasure. So I want to remind everyone too. Tomorrow we will interview Sergey from 1inch. So we'll talk through their V2, and then Friday we'll have Matt Leasing from Out of the Ether. It's a book he wrote, which I think all of us know by now, but we're going to talk through the epic narrative that he tells of Ethereum. So anyways, everyone, have a great day, and we will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. So bye, Vance. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.